It's NWA TNA and we are rebooking from the start with Pro Wrestling Sim here on Spike Piledriver. Today we have 3 weekly pay-per-views where we are going to finish the NWA World Heavyweight Title Tournament and crown our first ever NWA Champion within NWA TNA. Right, if that sounds interesting, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's get straight on with pay-per-view number 3, the first one of today's episode. Okay, so it is July 3rd and we're back on pay-per-view and we start with a video showing what's happened in the last couple of weeks between Jeff Jarrett and Malice and Scott Hall and Ken Shamrock to get us to the matches for this evening. Right, before we get into things properly though, the NWA Board of Directors has appointed a new representative for TNA, and it's quite aptly Tammy Sytch. Now, Sytch is accompanied by her husband Chris Candido, who will be making his debut in the opening match tonight. And Tammy announces that 2 more championships will be debuting during July, the NWA World Tag Team Championship and the brand new TNA X Division Championship, which we'll hear more about in the coming weeks. First match of the evening is Chris Candido's debut against Jimmy Yang of the Flying Elvises. Quite a quick match, 1-star rating, 42% overall. Candido picks up the victory on his debut, unsurprisingly. Then backstage, the Fallen Angel Christopher Daniels is doing some sort of recruiting mission, and he's approached the Vampire Warrior backstage. The pair talk, but head into the shadows before we get any indication of whether an alliance has been formed or not. So Chris Daniels is on the lookout for like-minded individuals at the very least. Right, then we have a promo from Steve Corino. He's going to be future champion. He's made his way to the ring with his imposing new bodyguard, Justice, and he has championship pedigree. He's a former ECW champion, former NWA champion, and current ROH champion, and he wants to one day again be the NWA World Champion. And everyone else basically is going to make a fool out of everyone else in the tournament. And Conan has heard enough. He makes his way out, and we've got our first quarterfinal clash kicking off right now. 65% overall rating for that angle, but unfortunately for Steve Corino, despite his performances, it's Conan who pulls out the victory, and Steve Corino is not very happy about it either. Half-star rating for the match, not great, 54% overall, but Conan moves on to the semi-finals. And then the New Church are backstage. James Mitchell and his disciples have got their sights firmly locked on Jeff Jarrett. Malice will be personally making a sacrifice in order to bring the NWA Championship home to the New Church. Once again, we're building Malice up. He's our big heel going forward, who's not part of Scott Hall and his group. So that's a 64%, another pretty run-of-the-mill angle here. Then we go, Brian Christopher and Buff Bagwell might have suffered losses to K Crush and AJ Styles in the NWA title tournament, as you've seen last episode, but they're fully backing Scott Hall for victory, and they'll do anything they can to make sure that the title comes home to their as yet unnamed group. Brian Christopher is up in action next, so he stays out in the ring and he faces Cassidy O'Reilly, a youngster, and he beats him quite easily, and it's a bit of a dud, but a 37% final score is not great. The crowd weren't massively into it, but Christopher gets another victory, tries to rebuild himself after that loss. And then we get some dueling promos backstage. K Crush and AJ Styles are hyping up their chances against Rick Steiner and Scott Hall in tonight's other quarterfinals. Both men know they're underdogs, but the actions of others have joined them together, and they will watch each other's backs. Elsewhere, Jeremy Borash is interviewing Rick Steiner, who doesn't believe K Crush has a fight within him to get past the dog-faced gremlin tonight. Between the pair of them, a 62% rating. Everyone looking pretty decent coming out of it. And then it's Rick Steiner against K Crush. A great back-and-forth match for 9 minutes. K Crush putting a massive effort in, and they've got incredible chemistry as well, which really helped the match. But K Crush is the eventual winner, getting a 1-star match quality, 56% final score. K Crush moving on to the semi-finals in a great effort to get past the veteran Rick Steiner. Fantastic effort from K Crush. And then we head back to Jeremy Borash, who's with Scott Hall, and he tells him that he knows how to beat up young punk kids like AJ Styles. He also knows what it feels like for kids like him to try and make their name against the bad guy. Scott Hall will beat AJ Styles tonight, 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring, and it will be too sweet, kid. That's a 77% average score there for that promo. Scott Hall bringing out a bit of a reference to Sean Waltman in his promo, and he's going to beat AJ Styles tonight, so he thinks. Right, then we have Malice against Jeff Jarrett. Finally, these pair have clashed, and it's gone a little bit too long for Malice, and they've got pretty bad chemistry as opponents, which is really annoying moving forwards. We might have to pivot on this one, but Jeff Jarrett wins in the end despite the interference from Slash and Tempest. 48%. match quality of a single star, but then it's not over yet. Obviously, we've booked this before knowing we don't have any good chemistry. May have survived, but he won't survive the 3-on-1 beatdown. Malice leads the assault, puts Jarrett through a table at ringside, and Mitchell leads his disciples away as Jarrett is loaded onto a stretcher. Will he be able to make the semi-finals next week? Find out in about 3 minutes' time in this video. 70% average score for that rating for those two angles. Then our main event, Scott Hall against AJ Styles. And you can see here that we've had an interference from Curt Hennig towards the end of the match. AJ's putting in a great effort. 1.5-star match quality. Curt Hennig interferes on behalf of his old friend Scott Hall, and the bad guy advances to the semi-finals. He needed help to get past AJ Styles, which says a lot about AJ Styles. After the match, the debuting Curt Hennig joined Scott Hall and his crew of Bagwell and Christopher in a beatdown on AJ Styles. Vicious 4-on-1 assault. But the arrival of Hennig confirms what was obvious. The old friends are aligned. Then we've got another debut of BG James, who rushes down to the ring with his old pal K Crush. They chase the foreman off. And we have the Rowdy pair cleaning house to help AJ Styles at the end of the show. Two big debuts to mark night 3 of TNA. Curt Hennig and BG James both making their debuts. 71% score for the final match, for the final angle of the night. And that gives us a show rating of 65%. Two big debuts, two big names joining the fray. So Scott Hall is now paired with Curt Hennig, Buff Bagwell and Brian Christopher, with AJ Styles having a partnership with BG James and K Crush in that main event. Let's go to the next week for our second pay-per-view of the episode. But before we do that, a quick look at the updated brackets. We can see Jeff Jarrett against Conan in one semi-final, K Crush against Scott Hall in the other. Will Jeff Jarrett be able to make it to the semis? Will Conan get a bye to the final? We'll find out for week number 2, July 10th, right now. And the semi-finals are tonight. We get a video to start the show. Double main event. Scott Hall takes on K Crush. Jeff Jarrett takes on Conan. The winners collide next week for the NWA title. 70% rating for the opening angle of the show. That doesn't tell us the whole story though. But first up, we have Steve Corino and Justice against the tag team of James Storm and Chris Harris, going to be known as America's Most Wanted. Corino picks up a victory after the disappointing defeat last week, half-star. And then we go to Jeff Jarrett backstage with Jeremy Borash. He's far from 100% after the beating last week at the hands of Malice and the New Church, but he has been cleared to compete tonight and will give Conan the fight of his life. Not particularly great rating here, 54% for the score for that angle. Then another throwaway match. Christian York, Joey Matthews, Low Key against the Flying Elvises. Low Key picks up the victory, and it's another half-star match. Not great, but we are getting more people on the card, getting more people some match time. 34% score overall for that angle. Then we have backstage Jeremy Borash with BG James. He's excited to have joined the NWA TNA, and he's at the back with his friend K Crush. He's got the back of his friend K Crush. He'll do whatever he needs to do to make sure he gets a fair shot tonight. But K Crush interrupts. He tells BG that he's happy that his best friend is here by his side, but he wants him to stay clear tonight. He needs to beat Scott Hall 1-on-1. Remember, Hall obviously got the backing of his old friend Curt Hennig. Malice is in a squash match next against Chase Stevens. Nothing much to see here. He wins quickly, half a star, 33%. Moving forward, the New Church is still rising. Despite being knocked out of the tournament, James Mitchell's confident that Malice will one day lead the New Church to the promised land and become the NWA champion sooner rather than later. 63% there, and we go into another match with Curt Hennig making his debut, making light work of Elite Skipper. 2.5 star for this one, 7 minutes. Skipper putting in a good effort, but Mr. Perfect, as he used to be known, Curt Hennig, with a 52% final score for the match, gets his victory on his debut. Then, Tammy Sitch, the NWA representative, announces that a new division is being launched exclusively for total non-stop action. The X Division. It's not about weight limits, it's about no limits. And tonight there will be a 6-man tag team match featuring the 6 competitors who have been chosen specifically for the X Division Championship next week. And that match won't just be a regular match next week. It will be a 6-way Ultimate X match where 2 cadles cross high above the ring, forming an X where the new title belt will be hung. The winner will be the man to retrieve the belt. Those guys are Psychosis, Jerry Lynn, Juventud Guerrera, Chris Candido, Brian Christopher and AJ Styles. Right, so they are in a tag team match here. and it's a bit of a good match. 2.5 star, 49% overall. Brian Christopher picks up the victory for his team. But Jerry Lynn has been hit with an injury in this match. He might miss next week. We will see. Don't know if he's going to get a replacement yet because that's just happened. So it's unfortunate for Jerry Lynn to be on the losing side of this one. But Brian Christopher and though they're all engaging in a brawl after the match. So even with the injured, Jerry Lynn gets involved in the brawl because obviously, he was injured during the match. 56%. Moving on to Conan backstage with Jeremy Borash. He seems to be thinking that everyone's overlooking him in the Final Four tonight, and that's a dangerous mistake. K-Dog might be a happy guy on the surface, but underneath he is a ruthless killer who will not be overlooked. Jeff Jarrett takes on Conan in the next match, another 2.5 star match quality. But it is Jeff Jarrett who just about pulls out the win, despite Malice lurking once again at ringside. Jarrett gets the victory, 67% score. Crowd loved it. But Malice once again engages in a brawl with Jeff Jarrett. Survived the odds, he's ambushed, but he fights him off. Security ended up breaking them up, 74%. This one isn't over, despite their poor chemistry. This one is not over just yet. We've got to finish the story. And then we get to our main event already. Scott Hall against K-Crush. Fantastic efforts. No chemistry notes here. 1 star match quality, 66%. And unsurprisingly, Scott Hall gets the victory. Kurt Hennig had his back. BG James was told to stay out of the action, keep him backstage, not getting involved in the match, and that ultimately came to cost K-Crush. Hennig and Scott Hall talk about how perfect they are after cheating their way to victory. Hall is just 1 match away from the NWA World title, and there's no way that a schmuck like Jeff Jarrett is going to stop him. They're interrupted by a pissed off Ken Shamrock. Let's not forget about him and BG James, who storm the ring, chase Hennig away, leaving the ring clear for Jeff Jarrett to arrive. The pair, he gets into the face of Scott Hall, and the pair go back and forth, both declaring that they will be the champion next week. Tammy Sitch arrives on stage to close the show, announcing that the winner will have to do it all on their own, as the NWA title match will be inside a steel cage for the first cage match in TNA history. 77% overall score for this multiple part angle to give us a final show rating of 71%. Our best show in our short history, our 4-show history here. The star power really paying off to close the show. 71% overall, and that leads us nicely into next week, where we will declare our first ever NWA champion within NWA TNA. Okay, so here we go then. It's the 17th of July, 2002, and we are going to crown 2 brand new champions in NWA TNA, and the show starts with a highlight package of the tournament so far, showing how Scott Hall and Jeff Jarrett have made it to the finals. But in the ring, NWA representative Tammy Sitch talks about both men and how they will settle things inside a steel cage tonight to determine the new NWA champion. And speaking of NWA champions, she introduces a video of 3 former champions and legends, Ricky Steamboat, Harley Race, and Terry Funk, who are all in attendance tonight and make their way to the ring. The 3 legends give their respect to both men and hope that it will be a fair fight inside the steel cage tonight, as both men deserve to be NWA champion. And our next title match, including Jerry Lynn, who is injured, we get a quick video about the inaugural Ultimate X match. It's going to be a 5-way now to determine the X Division champion. Brian Christopher, Juventud Guerrera, Chris Candido, AJ Styles, and Psychosis. And it's a 3.5 star match. It's an absolute classic. They've stolen the show. The 2 luchadors getting a massive, major spot. Psychosis and Juventud throwing themselves off the cables and through a ringside table. AJ Styles, though, picks up the victory and is the inaugural NWA TNA X Division champion. A massive match, 3.5 stars, 64% final score for this one. AJ Styles coming out the winner. Was it really in any doubt? He might not have the overness and the popularity of the other 4 guys, but he is the new champion. And Ricky Steamboat takes the belt, wraps it around his waist, and secures it, and declares that AJ Styles is the future and the new X Division champion. Then we have a bit of a cool-down match. BG James and K-Crush in tag team action. It's BG James' debut match in TNA. They're facing the Flying Elvises of Jimmy Yang and Sonny Siaki. 1.5 star, 49%. Pretty much an easy win for BG James and K-Crush, moving on in their feud with Scott Hall and his gang. The New Church remains focused, so back in the ring, James Mitchell is there with Malice ahead of his match. He talks about the new sacrifice they're going to make in the form of Ken Shamrock, but they haven't forgotten about Jeff Jarrett. Shamrock has heard enough though and storms the ring as the bell sounds for our next contest. 57% there to build us into this match, which is only a half-star rating, 46. Malice was a little bit tired in 7 minutes, which doesn't bode well for his push. But he is unfortunately on the losing end as Ken Shamrock taps him out with another ankle lock. Shamrock moving forward. He obviously has a clash with Scott Hall coming up, and that is what he talks about next. He clears Malice from the ring, grabs the microphone and calls out Scott Hall. He doesn't care about the NWA title, it's just a nice to have really. He wants revenge on Scott Hall, but Kurt Hennig has heard enough and runs down, and the pair brawl in the ring until NWA representative Tammy Sitch sends security down to separate the pair and announces they will fight next week to determine the new #1 contender for whoever is the NWA champion after tonight. 62% overall. The promo on Scott Hall kind of let down the angle, but never mind. That one is giving us a main event for next week. Kurt Hennig against Ken Shamrock should be a classic, and then we are ready for the main event already. The NWA legends come back down to the ring, and then we get our introductions for Jeff Jarrett and Scott Hall making their way to the ring for tonight's main event, the cage match. It's a quick event, this one, because we've got two big title matches taking up a lot of time. 69% going into the main event, which is a bit of a letdown. Both men tired by the end of the night, have bad chemistry. You'd think they'd have worked that out in WCW if they had bad chemistry, but never mind. They went for an epic feel. The crowd did not give two hoots, and that kind of as a put of a down at half-star match quality, 66%. And oh, by the way, Scott Hall wins the cage match by completely clean, no interference, puts Jeff Jarrett down with an outsider's edge off the top rope to get the victory. Their bad chemistry has kind of ruined this one a little bit, but never mind. I thought Scott Hall and Jeff Jarrett had pretty decent chemistry when they interacted in WCW, but never mind. After the match, Hall is awarded the title by Funk, Steamboat and Race. They give him the £10 of gold and declare him the new NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Hall then cuts a promo on all the big stars in the back, singling out Jarrett, Shamrock and BG James to name but three, saying that nobody can stop Scott Hall from being the NWA Champion for life. And that is the end of the show. 69% for that angle. Gives us an overall show rating of 66. A bit of a letdown from week number 4. The second one in this video of 71%, but 66 is still good. We've got two new champions. AJ Styles is X Division champion. Scott Hall is NWA champion. And there we have it. That is the 5th pay-per-view in the books. We'll have a quick look at our titles now. Now we have two champions. Scott Hall, NWA champion from the 17th of July. Still no tag team champions, as we haven't decided how we're going to award those ones yet. And AJ Styles, the inaugural TNA X Division champion, as we move forward. Next time out, we'll have some title defenses, I'm sure, and we'll probably introduce the NWA tag team titles as well and get a bit of a tag division going. We've got plenty of fledgling teams to try and boost up this division, and we'll see where we go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you're enjoying this series, if you're enjoying this new look NWA TNA from the very beginning. If you've got any thoughts on where we should go and who we should push, please share them, and I'll catch you for the next set of NWA TNA pay-per-views. Thanks for watching.